An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action is supported by ILAA, a firm dedicated to supporting aspiring new and established leaders. For more information, please find them at human-centeredleaders.com. Hello, Imperfect Leaders. I am so excited. My new book, An Imperfect Leader, Human-Centered Leadership in After Action, is now available. You can order it by going to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I've seen it online in lots of bookstores. And if you like it, would you please leave a positive review? Thank you so much for your support. If you follow me on LinkedIn or on other social media platforms, I talk a lot about coaching. I'm somewhat obsessed with it because my compelling purpose for this podcast and why I wrote the book An Imperfect Leader is because I want to positively impact leader longevity. And what does that mean? I want to play a role in helping leaders remain in their jobs. When talented leaders are able to remain in their positions, we see things like confusion and false starts and anxiety and anger. They actually turn into higher degrees of certainty, true paths forward, a sense of calmness, reliability, and certainly peace of mind. I get into all of that a lot more with my guests and share some startling national statistics about turnover rates. Really, it just leads me to this conclusion that we must do better. We must provide a space for those leaders who have historically been obstructed from leadership roles and give them support. And one way to do that is to share our stories. Not just our achievements, but really what we've learned from our experiences. And to do that with trusted coaches. My guest is Dr. Gladys Cruz, the incoming president of AASA, the Superintendents Association. You're going to love this episode. She's wonderful. Thanks for tuning in. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Gladys Cruz is my guest. Dr. Cruz is the District Superintendent for Questar III, based in Castleton, New York. In addition to that role, Dr. Cruz serves as the lead teacher for the AASA Aspiring Superintendents Academy for Latino and Latina Leaders, and is a mentor in the AASA National Superintendent Certification Program. And Dr. Cruz is the President-Elect of AASA, the School Superintendents Association. Gladys, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Cruz, I've learned a good deal from reading about you, reading your blog posts, and most recently, seeing your presentation in San Antonio. And I'd like to talk about your presentation. You spoke to the thousands of us assembled together to bring awareness and a plan for addressing superintendent turnover. And that topic is really near and dear to my heart because it's exactly why I created this podcast. The national average for school superintendents is about 3 years. And if you're a woman or a leader of color, it's even less. And I thought that if I could invite guests to talk about and reflect upon decisions that they were making or have made, that we could help our peers become more predictably successful in their jobs. And so in your speech, I wrote in my notebook, I even have it in front of me, how you mentioned that the turnover in New York and Maine and Oregon. And then I can also just kind of talk about the fact that those are similar problems or similar cautionary tales, because in Missouri, where I was superintendent, and now in Washington State, where I live, they have very similar stats. And so would you take a moment? Would you tell us a little bit about the theme for your presidency, which I think I wrote it down, leading in a new era, new challenges, new approaches, and then the foundation that you hope to lay for new and aspiring superintendents?
Absolutely. So as you know, Peter, we have heard a lot about the looming teacher shortage, but as I indicated, the staffing challenge is much greater. And we read about it in various journals. In the February 2022 article in Education Week, they talked about the fact that there is no year-to-year data collection. And that's an issue. As you started this podcast, you talked about how the tenure of a superintendent is usually 3 to 4 years. That's a very short tenure. And then if you're a minority, it's even shorter. So, and you know how important it is to have continuity and consistency in that role. So I really am hoping that we can bring some awareness to some of these issues and that we can highlight the importance of gathering that data and sharing it with the field. during the pandemic, we learned how important it is to stay connected. I'm a big believer of collective wisdom. Collective wisdom is greater than individual wisdom. So when we come together as a group, we put our heads together and the outcomes are much better. So, I'm thinking that for my platform, I want to continue to build on what AASA has done. As you stated, I am a lead teacher of the AASA Aspiring Academy for Superintendents for Latino and Latina Administrators. And that is a joyful academy that I co-lead with Dr. Lupita Hightower from Arizona. And what we've learned in the past, we are now going to launch our third cohort, is the difficulties that those administrators even have in becoming a part of that academy. Their superintendents and their districts sometimes do not support and do not support that their attendance at this academy, either monetarily or time-wise. So it becomes a burden on them individually. And we've learned so much in those academies, how important it is for them to have a cohort of like-minded individuals where they feel at ease. Last year, when we were completing the second cohort, during one of the last sessions last year, one of the academy members said, I just want to thank you for providing me a space where I feel comfortable and where I feel I'm a part of. And that was, to me, heartbreaking, because I don't believe any administrator, color or any administrator, any individual should go through a system not feeling part of it. So that's something that is dear to my heart, building that pipeline of diverse leaders that look more like the student population that we serve. And then, I'm honored to serve as a mentor for the certification program. And that is something that I just love, because they learn as much from me as I learn from them, to tell you the truth. And that's why it's so important to stay connected. The superintendency can be a very lonely.
It's a very lonely position,
but
right?
You can make it better if you connect with others, right?
That's exactly right. Yes, it's almost as if I set you up for that. But here's the thing, right? That's why you need to belong to organizations like AASA. You speak to harvesting that collective wisdom. That is such an important piece to any leader's work, is to recognize that you do not have all the answers, nor should you, that the best answer is the one that comes from that room, as well as also asking yourself, who is not in this room, who needs to provide us with an important perspective. And so the work that you're doing with the cohort of Latino and Latina administrators is such an important piece, because it's about building up that psychological safety so that they have the tools to be able to return to a district where they sometimes are the trailblazer in their district, and trying to also deal with that real, I don't know any other word, but sort of trauma that is induced by those sort of subtle and not so subtle statements that one might make about, well, I don't know, it seems like a lot of time away from the district. So then you don't think I can do it or shouldn't do it, as opposed to, no, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough. And in fact, I'm going to be ready to lead a district at some point, and this is how I'm going to get there. So I'm so glad that you're doing this work. There's a difference between reform and transformation. And I certainly felt that way. And as you were talking, I was getting so excited about this next year ahead, with David Schuler as the executive director, with you being his support as the president. Reform is usually a, sort of one size fits all, high pressure coaching for compliance. And transformation is that establishing that compelling purpose, asking questions, lots of questions, making mid-course corrections. It's like we have a destination, but we may have to think about different ways to get there, as well as genuine coaching. And that includes peer coaching. And so in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's this dimension, collective, there's that word again, aspiration, collective aspiration. And that's really the heart of an organization's work. It says, how do we want to be together? What do we want to create together? And so when I learned about you and your role in AASA's Learning 2025 network, it reinforced for me that your work to retain superintendents is deeply rooted in a desire to see enduring change. Would you describe Learning 2025 and your role in supporting superintendents?
Absolutely. So Learning 2025 is what I call a movement that calls for a holistic redesign of the public school system by 2025. It aims to address the changing needs of students and prepare them for success in the 21st century, right? And we're like a quarter into the 21st century. It focuses on three main areas that are critical for the future of education. One is culture. When you talk about collective wisdom and bringing everybody together and rowing in the same direction, you hear these things. That is something that you have to build your culture around, right? And in education, people are most important, right? The staff that we have, and then the children, the learners that we serve. So the commissioners, and I was honored to be a commissioner in that group, highlighted the importance of the whole learner, that no learner be marginalized, regardless of their language, of their color, of their race, of their gender, any of those areas, and that it be future-driven systems, right? So we have to prepare our students for their futures, not ours. And if you think about it, schools you find schools that are different now, but if a person went to sleep 100 years ago and came back into a classroom, they would be able to recognize the classroom, right? Because it looks very much the same, unless they come into one of these classrooms that has been really transformed. So that's one of the areas, the key areas. The other is social, emotional, and cognitive growth. So the commissioners here talked about the importance of having a continuous improvement cycle, whereby you use data analytics, you plant learning experiences, or you plant behavior systems, then you learn, and then you gather data around the evidence, and then you go back to that, okay, how did this work? And systems are doing a lot of this work, for example, in behavior and academic with the MTSS. That's the multi-tiered system of support.
You read my mind. I was about to say, my mother will text me and say, "What is MTSS?" So I'm glad that you've now defined it for her. Yes. Sorry, keep going.
Yes. So, and then the last and final area is around resources. And here the commissioners highlighted the importance of the early learning, access to early learning, developing a pipeline of diverse educators. And we started talking about this a few minutes ago. We need staff that looks like our student population at all levels of the system. We know that there's more diversity in the teaching ranks, but we need to expand that to all levels of the system. We also, in that area, talked about community resources and bringing those resources all together to support the whole child and to support the learners we have in our systems and the families. And then ensuring that we stay abreast with the technological advances. Nowadays, everybody's talking about ChatGPT and AI and how is that going to impact education? Well, the truth is we've been using AI for a long time. I think one of the most critical pieces in all of this is that we really need to teach critical thinking skills, problem solving skills.
I bet you have examples in Questar III because of the number of districts that you oversee of place-based or project-based learning that really gets to that.
So we have a comprehensive high school, Tech Valley High School, that is completely project-based learning. We work with business partners. So there is a business alliance. That business alliance meets with our teachers when they create projects. So for example, there's a project on, let's find out how the water if the water is contaminated. So we would bring in the businesses. They will recommend, okay, so you should be working with X or Y or Z. And then those businesses also become panels who help to rate those projects at the end. So students are presented with real problems, sometimes that businesses have, they have on their to-do list, but they never get to it. So they present those, they pitch these problems to our students. The students work in groups. They have teams, they work collaboratively, and they also work individually, of course, but they tackle those problems through a engineering design model. And they have to come up with some great solutions that then they present to a panel of businesses in the field.
So our systems thinkers who are listening to this, no doubt are thinking how wonderful for children, how excellent in terms of the system of going beyond the internal system and reaching out to external systems who then not only contribute to learning in your area, in your region, and also care about the success of schools and are more likely to vote yes on bonds and budgets, because in New York, the communities vote on your budgets. And so now you've got real advocates because they're seeing the learning and its relevance and why it's important to the region. I could imagine that is an important piece to the success that you're having in Questar III.
Absolutely. And so this school, it's a small school and it has 100% graduation rate. We have about 35% of our students with IEPs or 504, and they can graduate with an associate's degree. Generally speaking, students graduate with about 28 college credits. So it's it's on a college campus. Is located at the CNSE, the College of Nanoscience and Engineering, at the University at Albany. Based on that model, we were fortunate to get a P-TECH. You probably have heard of P-TECH schools and early college, high school. So we were fortunate to get 2 grants. Instead of doing 2 programs, we partnered with a 2-year college and we created a second STEM high school with pathways. So students will graduate within one of the pathways, and it's project-based learning, using the model of Tech Valley High. Will graduate with a 2-year degree with no cost to them or their families.
That is a game changer. And to think about Sherry Cammy's presentation at our conference, these are the stories we need to tell about our school districts, because there's a narrative out there that public schools specifically, that we're not innovative. And that is such an innovative way of tackling, as you said, future, right? As opposed to what do I need now? No, we know that there's an unpredictable, never-changing world, but there are certain things that are now becoming very clear, and this is a way to help support. That's fantastic. And we'll be right back. An Imperfect Leader is brought to you by EdConnective, whose mission is to ensure student success through transformative teacher training. EdConnective helps teachers move from awareness about strategies and frameworks to successful and consistent implementation. Their friendly coaches celebrate classroom success with teachers, and with concrete classroom data, support teachers in their growth, one step at a time. I've been thinking about this a lot. During the pandemic, student teachers didn't get a chance to do their student teaching with children. They just started teaching in classrooms. And they need help. Across the nation, states are adopting higher expectations to make up for learning loss. That's where EdConnective fits in. Their vision is that every student deserves a great teacher, and every teacher deserves a great coach. Find out more by contacting them at edconnective.com. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader, called Imperfect Leader in After Action. My guest is Dr. Gladys Cruz, the District Superintendent for Questar III, based in Castleton, New York, and President-Elect of AASA, the School Superintendents Association. In this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we discuss it. So, Gladys, what happened?
So I want to talk about a building project that took decades, literally decades to complete. I think this is important given that every superintendent deals with facility issues. So for years, we tried to renovate one of our technical schools for our high school students. Plans changed many times, and I mean many times, when I was in different positions within the BOCES. As superintendent, we decided to build a new school in another location. These plans fell through. Unfortunately, the builder and the board didn't come to terms on the agreement. So it fell through and it left us at the start line. So we had to start all over. As you can imagine, people did not feel good. And we needed to do something. We had, as a superintendent, I decided to stay where we are. Knowing that this too was an imperfect site and that there were limitations and concerns about our building and location. In fact, I learned that there were rumors about our site being contaminated due to hosting a former airport. So that, created some angst in me. And in the end, I decided to have an environmental study done to ensure that the location was environmentally appropriate and that there wasn't any issue there, because if there were, we should, definitely not have students and staff there. Fortunately, we learned that the site was safe and we proceeded with a long overdue renovation project. Today, it is a beautiful state-of-the-art facility housing technical programs aligned to the job market in our area.
That is a great sort of phrasing and summarizing of what happened. Now let's dig into it a little bit. If I could just summarize what I think I heard. So you're building a technical center, right, for your region. And I wonder, before I ask any more, would you describe what BOCES means? Because if you're not a New Yorker, as a native New Yorker, I'm very familiar with BOCES, but if you're not a New Yorker, you may not understand what that means.
Sure. So BOCES stands for Board of Cooperative Educational Services, and they play a vital role in the New York State Education Department. BOCES are regional educational service agencies that are designed to provide shared educational programs and services to districts in a particular region. They were created by the New York State Legislature in 1948 to help districts share resources, reduce costs, and provide programs and services that might not be possible otherwise.
Right after World War II.
Right.
Right.
And just think about it. So we created a heavy equipment operations and maintenance program for our region. If you were to do that alone in a district, it would be very cost prohibitive, right? But if you bring you bring the districts together, maybe one district has 3 students, another one has 2, another one has 1, you can bring them all together and you can create it in a much more cost efficient way. So that's really what BOCES are.
Yeah, not just materials, but also talent in terms of who can teach those courses. And what a great way to sort of bring people together. So many states have something similar. Missouri didn't really. Around CTE, we would have area career centers, but it was nothing to the extent to what they do in New York and what I've seen in Washington State as well. Okay. So to summarize, you see a need, you and your board and your communities have a need for updating and upgrading your technical centers. And after an RFP process and all of the things that go into it, and during negotiations with your builder, things fall apart. And then you're also hearing some things about the actual site and whether it's an appropriate site based on, to some extent, hearsay, but it's enough of a concern for you that you did an environmental study as well. And so ultimately, though, we find ourselves now with a beautiful space where incredible things are happening for children and communities. As you look back, though, what got overlooked?
So, I think that you can never over communicate. So it was that constant communication to our staff, our internal staff, our educators, our region, because I had gone out to present to boards of education in our component districts, and they would ask me, what are you going to do with that center? It needs to be upgraded. So it was, I think you can never over communicate. So I think that's always something that you can always get better at, telling people, hey, this is what happened. And now we're back to square one. I'm sure that the change in plans and delay in completion made some of our staff and our school districts wonder if we would ever get it done. This perhaps impacted our credibility in the short term. But I would say I'm a person, a person of my word. And if I say I'm going to get something done, I will get it done.
My gosh, it will get done.
And I did. And it was kind of scary at one point because, even if you're that whole environmental study, that was a big piece, right? And ensuring that the location was safe. And we have 23 acres. It's a location with a lot of acreage. Thank goodness everything came back clear and we were able to renovate it. And then the pandemic happened, right? And it actually was a silver lining because when the governor closed us March 18, we were ready to start the renovation in the summer. So we were able to start it sooner. And that worked out for us.
So you had a time delay because of the negotiations and that falling apart and having to restart that whole process. And then you gained time back. You may be the only person with a positive story about the pandemic, but that's a great one. When you're a systems thinker, you think about decisions you make and the results you hope to see. And then in between, in that time period before you get what you want to see, there's sometimes tensions that need to be managed. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you learned about relationships or what new relationships were formed based on this experience.
I've been here for 25 years. So I had been part of a lot of starts and stops to renovate this center. The staff, they really didn't want to move from the location. So we came and we told them, we're going to build a new building. And it got them all, got them all excited about that. And then we come back and we said, oh, that fell through. We are not going to build a new building. We are going to we have to start all over. And they were like, okay, here we go again kind of thing. So I think I learned the importance of making myself accessible to them. Sometimes it was not a very pleasant conversation. There were a lot of false starts. And so I really learned that importance of the relationships with my staff and constantly going in, just checking in on them and just making myself visible. And, to this day, now I go to the buildings, I go to the classrooms, they're glad to see me.
For those who are listening who are new in their careers and believe as well that communication is important and that an email will suffice, what we're hearing really powerfully is the importance of making that personal and close contact. People will write their own narratives if you're not close and in contact with the people most impacted by decisions.
Yeah, and just asking them continuously for feedback. Since the pandemic, I did something here that it takes a lot of time. I do now I do it every 2 weeks, but I did a weekly virtual town hall. And I did that to bring staff together at the beginning to kind of give them the information of the pandemic as we knew it and keep them updated. Then I started to bring guests and I would bring in teachers and tell them, how are you adapting to remote teaching and learning? Then I started bringing students in. And, it has become part of the DNA of the organization. And, that's important because if not, people do create their own narratives.
What frustrated you?
When I was doing it, it was not being able to move fast enough. I like to get things done. And of course, the whole deal of building a new technical school fell through. To me, I like to get things done. So not being able to move and not being able to deliver on a promise frustrates me a lot.
If you were to ask me what I thought frustrated you, it was that last piece right there. Certainly all those other pieces about time delays and things like that. In our conversation so far, you have really communicated this desire to be true to your word, and you gave them your word. It was a promise. And you saw, as forward-thinking superintendents do, what this was going to mean for the districts that you serve. And so I imagine that was great frustration for you.
It was, it just, I like to deliver on my promise. And so not being able to deliver and have to go back to boards of education, have to go back to my staff and say, okay, we're back to square one. We got to start this all over. That frustrates me immensely.
There's real power, though, in the willingness and the ability to be vulnerable with each of those entities you just described, to be able to say, no, not yet. Because you could have, at some point, I guess, just agreed to the terms of this construction contract that you knew was a bad deal. And so that's hard because as the superintendent, you want to deliver and you want to do it quickly. And you also had to take a step back and say, not yet, but I promise you we will get this done.
I'm able to now reflect on that and say to folks, it was a blessing in disguise that fell through, and that we were able to rethink and reconsider the site where we had our technical school. And that was really the best option. It was always right there in front of us. And we never were courageous enough to say, this is what we need to do. And this is what we're going to do. And we're going to make it happen.
My guest, again, was Dr. Gladys Cruz. And Dr. Cruz, I read a quote attributed to you, so you'll have to tell me if this is in fact you. But it said, and it sounds like it was because of everything you've said today, do the teachers look like the children that they're teaching? Are they diverse? Because we know that the student population is diverse, and then you move from there. Are the voices of all the children and all the educators being heard? I've been really looking forward to our conversation because nested patterns like shared leadership, high levels of collaboration, empathy, compassion, they're all clearly important to you. They are the pathways to a better future for our children and our nation. And I'm just grateful for having the time with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was great, having this conversation with you, and good luck in your future podcasts.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created the Daruma doll butterfly artwork. Imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It is a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader, so I hope you'll join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action.